Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2022 Travelers Data Dive Show. I'm going to try and recap a little bit of the initial research show from last night. Felt pretty bad. It was a rushed show. Didn't feel quite organized, so I'm going to try to get through some of the initial research and then dig into the data as well. So it might be a bit of a longer show, but that just means more time to have fun and look at some data. So let's get right into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool out there. It's going to make you a much better gambler, a much smarter DFS player. Go check them out. It's well worth your investment. In the descriptions to the shows, in the descriptions to the videos to the shows, there are links to my social media. This is where I place my betting cards for the golf content I create, as well as interesting research for the baseball and golf content I create, including some facts about the Travelers winners dating back to 2012 that I posted to Twitter today. So if you want to see some of that research, give me a follow at the links in the descriptions. And then finally, we're live. Chat is open. Want to hear from you all. How did your U.S. Open go? What are you thinking about early on for the Travelers? Are there any players that you think are going to have the U.S. Open hangover, or any players that you're wanting to key in on? What certain statistics? So let's jump in chat, have a good time, and I want to hear from you all, especially around the greens here at TPC River Highlands. But let's dig into the data for the 2022 Travelers. And we start with the tournament fact sheet. And even though, as I mentioned, we did some of this last night, felt pretty bad. It was a rushed show since I had to play some baseball last night, which I normally don't have to do on a Sunday evening. So let me get this camera situated, all that good stuff. Maybe a little more. Yeah, there we go. So really quickly from the GCSAA, we're at TPC River Highlands in Cromwell, Connecticut. It is a very short par 70, not even 6,900 yards. Very short par 70. Not very small, but small greens, average of 5,000 square feet, where the tour average is about 6,000 square feet. Quite a bit of fairway, a lot of rough. The big thing about the rough is it is bluegrass and tall fescue, more than 4 inches deep. It is always long. It is always very difficult to play out of. We are on bent and POA. And this is where I mentioned in the intro that I want to hear from you all. I am leaning towards POA. It was POA last year, or classified as POA per Fantasy National. Now, every year prior to last year was classified as bent. So curious to hear your take. I'm leaning towards POA, but we'll take a look at the previous course conditions for that. And then the last thing is a Pete Dye design. So we have a couple of things here already that we can filter out when looking at statistics this week. Pete Dye designs and very short courses. We know those two things to be certain. So there's a look at the GCSAA tournament fact sheet. We move now to Fantasy National. And before we get too terribly into it, let's take a look at the course breakdown per Fantasy National. Mentioned last night, the 9th most difficult hole plays to 100th over par. The 10th most difficult hole plays to 100th under par. So it's right at average. Generally, you'll have a few more lower scores than higher, but it plays to average. You have one pretty decent eagle opportunity here on the par 5 13th, and then the drivable 15th as well. Yields a 1.5 eagle rate for a par 4. That's pretty high for a par 4, but not high in the grand scheme of things. We looked at this last night as well. Average stroke gain by shot type. Putting was the dominant factor, or is the dominant factor here at TPC River Highlands. There's the top 10s. You go to the top 5s, the strokes gain approach start to catch up, and then the winners, it's about even. Maybe the approach even surpasses putting by a little bit, but mostly it is strokes gain putting. That has a combination to do with the small greens, the greens in regulation proximity, which we'll see that chart here in a bit. So a lot of factors here on why putting is so important. And then off the tee and around the green are fairly consistent with each other. The off the tee is a bit more important, say in the top 10s and the top 5s, and then the around the green is essentially the same. Off the tee is still slightly ahead, but that is why you see ball striking and short game so very close to each other, and short game actually outweighs ball striking for the top 10s and the top 5s. It's only the winners in their strokes gain approach where ball striking actually catches short game. So it's a short game course. You would expect that from a sub 6,900 yard course, putting, scrambling, chipping, and all that. What is a little surprising, or at least I feel is a little deceiving, is the strokes gained by hole by par. Here it says the par 5s are pretty much clear in terms of importance. About 2/10 here to 1/10 par 3s, and then the par 4s, in the middle. And then as you move your way up the leaderboard, par 4s start to catch up, and then the par 4s surpass the par 5s for the winners. But in each scenario, top 10s, top 5s, winners, the par 3s just lag behind. And while that does make a little bit of sense, it doesn't in the sense of, since there's only 2 par 5s, why is the par 5s the most important for the top 5s and the top 10s in the leader or on the leaderboard instead of the par 3s? So that's a little bit what's the word I'm looking for? A little confusing, at least on my end. The data does certainly back it up, so we're definitely going to be looking at a little bit of par 5s. There's a whole lot of par 4s we're going to be looking at. And because of that, or this is because of that, the par 4s, 400 to 450, there are 8 of the 12 par 4s measured to this length on the scorecard. You have 2 very short par 3s, 2 very long par 3s. You have the aforementioned drivable par 4, and then a positional style par 4 that's not drivable. It's about 340 yards. 2 long or longish par 4s, and then a short par 5 and a medium length par 5. Proximity here, most of the approach shots come from 150 to 175, and in relation to the average tour event, that's a lot higher here at TPC River Highlands. And we'll go through it again, but the first look at the importance of that proximity was not. It was just not important. And that's why proximity has always been the one golf statistic that I struggle with in terms of graphically it says something should be important, whereas the data says it's not. But mostly 150 to 175 and 125 to 150 makes a lot of sense on a club down course. On a short course, you would expect that. Historic cut line has been hovering right around -1. It was -3 in 2020. It was +1 in 2017. It has gradually gotten easier, but has leveled off around -1 for the past few years. Scoring distribution, as I mentioned, it's about an average course, maybe slightly easier, but it's going to be average. You see not a lot of eagles, and then the bogeys and the doubles sum up to just under the birdies. So it's going to be average. Driving accuracy, much higher here than the average tour event. Players know that the rough is penal. You just have to find the fairways here. Green and regulation percentage, even though the greens are smaller, it's still higher here. And the scrambling percentage is a little bit less successful here at TPC River Highlands versus the average tour event. 3 putts per round, a little less than average tour event. And with a club down course, you would expect the driving distance to be less. It certainly is here. Proximity, shorter to the hole or closer to the hole than the average tour event. So there's a look at the course breakdown fairly quickly in Fantasy National. Let's come back to the home page, and I've went ahead and sorted this and put the custom date range at the beginning of the PGA Tour season. And the reason why is the first thing we're going to look at here, short courses. We know this is going to be a very short course. It always has been. So your top performers on short courses since the start of this PGA Tour season. You have Seamus Power, Tom Hoge, Patrick Cantlay, Lonto Griffin, Jordan Spieth, Troy Merritt, Mackenzie Hughes, Denny McCarthy, Keith Mitchell, and Russell Henley. Those are your top 10 on short courses. And then if we want to look at Pete Dye designs, going to have to lengthen or expand our data set here. I'm going to go all the way back to January 1st. While Pete Dye is one of the more common architects on the PGA Tour, there's still enough tournaments where Pete Dye isn't the designer to where you kind of have to go back a little bit just to bring in enough rounds. So most of the players here have somewhere in the teens, maybe into the 20s. So your top Pete Dye design coursed players since the start of 2021. Those players are Sung Jae, Brian Harmon, Patrick Cantlay, Justin Thomas, Harold Varner III, Siwoo, Joaquin Neiman, Keegan Bradley, Doug Gim, and Cam Davis. I skipped Will Zalatoris. He has withdrawn. He is not in the field this week. So there's your top 10 on Pete Dye designed courses. One of the things that we looked at a little bit last night but didn't really narrow it down was putting. And because I am leaning towards POA, I'm going to go to POA as the default and then maybe look at bent if chat wants to. But on POA greens, and we've had quite a bit of POA lately with the U.S. Open and then earlier in the season. Looks like we're going to need to expand it out a little bit further. Let me see. Did Mito was in? He missed the cut. Yeah, so it doesn't have the U.S. Open course classified, Brookline classified as POA yet in Fantasy National. So let me bring this out to last year, January 1st of 2021, just to get, again, enough rounds. You encapsulate last year's February and March, this year's February and March. So, again, not a lot of rounds, but I don't want to go too far back. So your top putters, and I'm definitely going to add the fast filter. This has always been fast here at TPC River Highlands. So your top performers since the start of 2021: Bryce Garnett, Jason Kokrak, Mark Leishman, Kevin Kisner, JT Poston, Jonas Blixt, Andrew Putnam, Sepp Straka, Hank Lebiota, and Andrew Landry. And you can see the reason why I don't like putting a whole lot of weight into this is there's just not a lot of rounds. Like Kevin Kisner only has 5 rounds. Your leader, Bryce Garnett, only has 6. So I'm struggling to justify using fast POA because I don't want to go too far back, but I also want enough data to make it worthwhile. P, how you doing? Thanks for jumping in chat and tuning in. Hopefully you saw the note that I was going to be late last night and were able to watch the show earlier today. But if not, welcome. I am recapping a little bit of the initial research since I don't think a lot of people were able to catch it or caught the note. But thanks for jumping in chat. How has your week started? How did your U.S. Open go? Mine was quite a bit of a roller coaster that ended on the downswing. Saturday afternoon, I was looking very good. I had Patrick Rogers and Aaron Wise and Will Zalatoris. And even though Zalatoris played extremely well, tied for second, Rogers and Wise imploded, and that tanked a whole lot of my lineups. But thanks for jumping in chat. So that's why I am struggling with the putting. Is I just don't want to go too far back, but yet I also need enough rounds to justify it. So that's a look at the putting for now. We might come back into it here in a bit. But that is really a whole lot of the Fantasy National review that we did last night. Let's go ahead and look at some of these historic conditions and figure out what we want to look at moving forward. So as I said in the GCSAA portion, I thought I was dead. That ended up cashing. Had some monster 4-6s lineups. Did not have any Nick Hardy. I did not either. Did not have any Nick Hardy. I was actually really, really high on him starting in the fall, and he just hasn't played well. His Korn Ferry Tour super season was amazing. So I was really high coming out, or him coming onto the PGA Tour. He hadn't played well, and then, comes out and nowhere top 15's the U.S. Open. But good. Glad to see that you cashed some monster 4-6s. I had a few 6-6s, which I believe only 2 or 3% had 6-6s. I had some 6-6s, but they weren't exciting. I did not have nearly enough Matt Fitzpatrick. Even though he was 4th in my rankings, did not have nearly enough of him because I thought he was going to be chalky. He ended up being chalky. There was a good reason why he was chalky. That was a poor decision on my part. Hardy's sister works in the pro shop at the local course here. Awesome. That's sweet. Has anybody heard from him since yesterday or anything like that? Like I said, I was really high on him coming out in the fall, and then he hasn't played well. I know he's a local guy for you. Doug Gim, Nick Hardy, Fitz went to Northwestern, in fact. So pretty big weekend for the Chicago area golf. So Flavin, yeah, you haven't heard too much from him, but he's had a couple of showings here lately in the past year or so. But so yeah, this is why I'm struggling with the green surfaces here at TPC River Highlands. You see, it was listed as POA last year, but yet it was bent the whole way through before then. So I'm still leaning POA, but I can certainly be convinced otherwise, and would welcome your input in chat or in the comments. But as I mentioned, rough length always long here. It's always very penal. That's why players put such a premium on finding the fairway. Green speeds have always been fast. It's always been short. It's a P-dye design. So there's a look at the past course conditions, and then we will absolutely take a look at the broken out strokes gained total color-coded worksheet that I do. But here's a quick look at some of the players that perform well or play well historically here at TPC River Highlands. Brian Harmon, 3 top 10s, a middling finish and a missed cut. Your defending champions, Harris English. He did not play this event well in the past 5 years leading up to his win. 2020 was DJ. 2019 was Chez Reavie. He didn't have the most success before he won. Jordan Spieth in 2017. It was his first time he had played the event, but yet in 2018, Bubba Watson won. He was not in the field this week. 2018 Bubba wins. He also won in 2015. So you have a little bit of it's weird. Some guys have really good form at this course and play well, and then you have players like Jordan Spieth who just haven't seen it and win. Harris English, Chez Reavie, where these guys generally don't play well here and then pop and win. So pretty weird. Here's a look at the guys that generally play this event well. Brian Harmon, Kevin Streelman, who won in 2014, I think. He's also got a solo second, a couple other top 15s. How did Bubba win a driving accuracy tournament? You know what? Hey, with this being a club down course, I could imagine him hitting a whole lot of irons, and he can putt. He gets that putter rolling. He can get going. Yes, lots of club downs off these tees. The course is less than 6,900 yards, so there are a lot of positional style holes, just like a normal Pete Dye design. Think RBC Heritage. As much as the players, famous as it is for some of the bigger holes, there are some layups, forced layups there at the players as well. So. But yeah, so Bubba won in 2018 and 2015. The Streelman, Reevy, you're winning in 2019. Jason Day, Brendan Steele has had a lot of success here. Rory, the 3 times he has played it, all top 20s. Patrick Cantley, I think I skipped, all top 15s, 4 for 4. So, there's a look at the players who have played it well. On the other end of the spectrum, players, for whatever reason, don't play it well. There's Uncle Luke for you, P. He has not played this event well. JT Poston, 0 for 4. Brandon Hagee, 0 for 3. Rory Sabatini, 0 for 3. Dylan Fratelli, 0 for 3. Let's see. Adam Shank, 0 for 4. So, again, for whatever reason, these players just don't play this event well. And we'll definitely break out the strokes gained total in the Excel portion of the show. There's a look at the tournament history here at Fantasy National. I went ahead and brought up the leaderboards, and we did go through last year's leaderboard a little bit. But you notice here, and it was true from the chart, all the putting here, just due to the ties, your top 18 players here, Adam Scott and above, all of the top 18 were positive in strokes gained putting. Josh, how you doing, pal? Hope your U.S. Open went well. This is an average difficulty course. And the reason I say that, I'm going to come back to the course breakdown real quick. The first thing I look at in terms of difficulty, your 9th and 10th most difficult holes. Well, your 9th is a 10th or 100th over par. Your 10th most difficult hole is 100th under par. So literally the balance of average. With that said, it's going to play, if anything, slightly on the easier side, as there are lower numbers under par. So, a little bit more than 2/10 here, 3/10 here, whereas, the most difficult holes aren't even 2/10. There's just more consistency to the difficulty of the holes. So it's going to be right at average. Right at average, and a very, very short course. Very short. Not even 6,900 yards short. But coming back to last year's leaderboard, we saw, top 18 players, all positive in terms of strokes gained putting. And, even strokes gained approach, you had quite a few guys that were negative. This is a short game course. 4 players were negative and around the green, and 1, I'm going to be, generous. There's a minus a tenth. It's essentially field average. Now, you did have a minus 1.6 and a minus 1, but this is a short game course, around the green and putting. So with that said, let's come back here. We looked at fast POA putting. Let's take a look at around the green, and I'm probably going to do the same as I did for the U.S. Open. I'm going to bring this to the start of the PGA Tour season. Let's look at strokes gained around the green in long rough. That was one of the factors or filters that I used in my final mixed condition model. I was pretty darn happy with the results of it. So your top strokes gained around the green players when there's long rough since the start of the PGA Tour season. Those players are Kevin Kisner, Sung Jae, Tommy Fleetwood, Andrew Novak, Rory, Webb Simpson, Scott Gutschewski, Denny McCarthy, Brendan Todd, and James Holland. So there's your top 10 strokes gained around the green in long rough. Let's see. Let's come back here, see what else we can glean. Surprisingly, even though for being a club down course, you see off the tee looks to be fairly important. Again, it's a 0, so it must have been, minuscule in the red. So, field average essentially, just under field average. And then Adam Scott was very poor off the tee. But of the top 18, you essentially have, 16 guys that were at least field average or better in off the tee. So something else that you probably want to look at, my guess is that's all in finding fairways. If that's the case, then we're going to look at good drives gained. But because off the tee, at least last year's, played so important, let's take a look and at off the tee. I need to remove the long course filter, long rough filter. Let's add short course. This might be interesting. Let's look at off the tee numbers on short courses. So your top strokes gained off the tee players when a course is short since the start of the PGA Tour season. You got Sung Jae, Tony Finau, Troy Merritt, Paul Barjon, Luke List, Eric Van Rooyen, Lonto Griffin, JT Poston, Keith Mitchell, Russell Henley, and Jordan Spieth. Well, that is a list of names right there for you. Troy Merritt generally pops on some putting metrics. Paul Barjon, I don't think I've said his name in a long while. Didn't get a chance to play the U.S. Open, had a busy week, but for sure playing this week. Yeah, I can understand. Hopefully you saw, or as I mentioned last week, it only takes one lineup. You had made the comment, Josh, that someone's going to turn $15 into $1 million, and all it takes is one lineup. So as much as I was high on Billy Horschel and Tommy Fleetwood and Mito, these guys that missed the cut, I had quite a few lineups that had Aaron Wise and Patrick Rogers, Will Zalatoris, Sam Burns. I mean, that was my core four on a couple of teams, and I told P earlier that I was looking really good Saturday with Rogers and Aaron Wise and Zalatoris all tied for the lead, and then the back nine happened and Rogers and Wise imploded. But all it takes is one lineup, and I thought I might have been able to brag about that, considering I was high on Billy Horschel, Tommy Fleetwood, and yet I had a lineup doing well, and then it kind of exploded, and that was the roller coaster. It was a good week. I don't know if I would classify it as a good week. It could have been a lot worse, considering Billy Horschel and Tommy Fleetwood and all these other players. I did not have nearly enough Matt Fitzpatrick. That was my downfall. I knew he would be chalky. He was chalky for a reason. I didn't fade him, but I certainly limited my use of him, and it came back to bite me. But there's a look at the strokes gained off the tee on short courses, and I just want to take a look at a couple of years just to make sure we're not getting some outliers here. So let's look at strokes gained. Again, putting a whole lot. Let's see, of your top 19, 3 of them were under field average. The same for around the green, and these numbers around the green are pretty close to field average. Now the approach was a lot more important in terms of guys above field average, but the numbers for the players that were under field average are pretty high. Off the tee, still fairly important. So we're going to see only finish under par. Thing in Stars and Scrubs builds. Hey, Awaken, thanks for jumping in chat. Haven't seen you in a bit. Hopefully your U.S. Open went well. I'm going to be honest with you, Awaken. I don't look at prices until tomorrow. I save all of the DFS stuff for the DFS Tactics show. You may very well be right, but whenever I do the data dive, I don't like to have prices. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't like to have prices have any effect on my thought process. I just want to look at the data. Skew, I think. I don't want to have the prices skew my vision of the data that I'm seeing. So that's why I don't look at anything DFS price-wise until Tuesdays. But thanks for jumping in chat. If you want to look at a specific player, by all means, or casually mention his price, don't mind at all. But I don't like to look at the full field of prices. until tomorrow. But there's a look at 2020, excuse me. So again, still a whole lot of putting, whole lot of around the green. I'm going to take a look at one more year just to make sure it's fairly consistent. You see here around the green, still very important. I mean, minus 0.2, minus 0.6, minus 0.6. The putting, the highest is -1, or I should say the lowest is -1. Now the approach has been steadily getting more important the more you go back in years, which is interesting. So might have to take a bit more scrutiny in Microsoft Excel towards strokes gained approach. But we've been going for a half an hour and there's a lot to cover still. So I'm going to jump to fairways and greens. And we saw that the fairways were much higher hit here at TPC River Highlands. It is a club down course. It's fairly, it's really short. It's fairly difficult. Rates to about average, but you see the accuracy here. Driving distance is lower. Players know that the rough is very, very penal. Very penal. So that fairway finding is an absolute must here. And that's why you don't see much in terms of distance. I mean, yes, you do have some players that are positive in distance. Like Brooks last year, that might be the highest, 72. So no, he was third. But you see here, there's just not a lot of correlation here for distance. Whereas fairways, it's quite a bit. Now you do have Emiliano Grillo missing a cut by finding fairways. My guess is he didn't chip or putt because that's normally what Grillo does. But I think, and seeing these numbers here, the negative halves, my thought process is to look at good drives gained. And what a good drive gained, defined by Fantasy National, is a player hits the fairway or the player still hits the green or fringe in regulation. That's, I guess, to simulate if the player maybe hits or makes it to the first cut, but is not so wayward that they can still reach the green. That's my assumption of what that is for. But I think it's going to be a pretty good statistic this week. Greens are generally one of the more important statistics on the PGA Tour with strokes gained approach, par 4 scoring. But because fairways are such an important factor, I really like the idea of combining the two this week. And the top 18 from last year, there were 5 that were negative in good drives gained, but these 3 are very, very, very close to field average. You do have 2 players that were very poor at good drives gained, and Adam Scott was one of the few that was negative and off the tee. So it was just a bad driving week for him. So I do like the idea of this good drives gained. Let's take a quick look at 2020 just to make sure it's somewhat consistent. Yeah, again, looking at the top 19 because of ties, you have a couple of bigger numbers here, Abraham Answer, but the fairways were much less important and the greens were really damn important. I don't know. What's your all's take? What do you think? What are you seeing? I like the idea of good drives gained for the reasons I mentioned. Do you think it's fairways? Do you think distance has any importance at all? Greens. I haven't really looked at Sam saves. I've just been doing strokes gained around the green. There isn't a whole lot of bunkerage here. So with that, let's come back to the field this week. We'll go to fairways and greens, and we'll look at several here. I do like the idea of a short course. We know this is short, so let's take a look at good drives gained when it's short. So your top 10 players your top 10 players at good drives gained when the course is short. You have Russell Knox, who's your champion in 2016 here at the Travelers. So Russell Knox, J.J. Spawn, Joel Damon, Alex Smalley, Luke List, Denny McCarthy, James Hahn, Chez Reavie, your champion in 2019, Brian Stewart, and Russell Henley. So we've seen Denny McCarthy has popped on quite a few filters, anything putting related, anything short game related. Now he's popping on some driving metrics due to the course and the way it's supposed to play. I mean, you see here, fourth in, I'm sorry, no, that's Luke List. 14th in fairways, a lot of sand saves, second in scrambling. The irons are getting better. I don't know if I would say good yet, but they're getting better. A lot to like with Denny McCarthy, of course, coming off his great U.S. Open. Let's see, other players here, like Russell Henley, always a great ball striker, 7th in good drives, 5th in greens. Let's see, we talked about McCarthy. Look at List, 2nd in greens when the course is short, 4th in distance when the course is short, but does not hit a fairway. So all of his good drives gained are in the greens, whereas Denny McCarthy's is all in finding the fairways. So it's an interesting difference there between players. Let's see. If we just want to take a look at fairways, and again, this is the filter for when the course is short, because we know TPC River Highlands is short, less than 6,900 yards. So your top players at hitting fairways when the course is short: Russell Knox, Ches Reavie, Brendan Todd, Brian Stewart, Jim Herman, Troy Merritt, Aaron Rye, J.J. Spawn, Hayden Buckley, and Kevin Streelman. So this is an interesting way to look at it. If we want to look just at fairways and yet who still hits greens, that means they're able to find fairways and their irons are good enough to where they can take advantage of that. So Russell Knox, first and first. I don't think that's beatable. Might want to double check me on that. I don't think that can be beat. Ches Reavie, not very good at greens. Brendan Todd, terrible at greens. So you see his irons very, very poor. Somebody like J.J. Spawn, 8th in fairways and 14th in greens, really good. C.T. Pan, 13th in fairways, 8th in greens. I really like C.T. Pan this week. This is a course that should suit him, or at least I would think would suit him. Let's see. Of the players that are fairway finders, your players that are also positive in terms of distance: Hayden Buckley, Sung Jae, Kramer Hickok, barely. Alex Smalley. Smalley is top 20 in distance and top 30 in fairways gained when the course is short. So perhaps an advantage of maybe being a long iron hitter, maybe best with 3 woods or 5 woods. Interesting to see there. Yeah, I think that's going to be it for the fairways and greens tab here. Let's take a quick look at birdies and bogeys, and in the data from Microsoft Excel last night, it said that bogeys avoided was a lot more important than birdies gained. We'll see. I have a different conclusion, but here's 2021. Your winner was more bogeys than birdies, but it was a fairly even amount. Again, going from the top 18 just because of ties. You have one player each negative. Let's see if there's any stronger correlation. You had Aaron Wise, winner, was a clunker of a finish, but that's really damn strong here. And then bogeys. You had a couple of missed cuts for the bogeys, and it looks like a little bit higher numbers. So to me, at least in 2021, it was birdies gained. We'll take a look at a couple more years. 2020, birdies and bogeys. Birdies gained. I mean, you have to come down all the way to Lonto Griffin at tie for 24th before you find somebody that's even negative in birdies gained. So that's interesting to see. And then 2019, more of the same, if I recall. So, I mean, even though you have a negative 0.7, there's the top 20. You have a negative 0.7, but a negative 2.7 in bogeys. And it looks like there's higher numbers consistently in the birdies gained. So at least in the past 3 years, it looks like it's birdies gained. And just a little nugget of info or whatever when I was doing research on the winners of the Travelers. The winners themselves were more birdies than bogeys, generally speaking. A couple of exceptions, but generally speaking, it was more birdies than bogeys. So I'm leaning towards more birdies gained than bogeys avoided. But with that said, since it's a short course, there's not a lot of eagles, I'm still thinking opportunities. I did that for the U.S. Open. I thought it was solid. I thought my mixed data model was pretty good. So we'll look at opportunities and we'll look at birdies. Again, I'm going to keep the short course filter on. We know this course is short. I don't know if I would want to do average because sometimes it does play easy. Sometimes it does play difficult. You see a few easy rounds here. You have a difficult round, a couple of difficults, a couple of easy. So, I mean, generally speaking, on the average, it plays to average. But I don't think I want to put average, as there can be rounds where it's easy and or difficult throughout the tournament. So, your top opportunities gained players when a course is short since the start of the PGA Tour season. You've got Jordan Spieth, Keegan, Lonto Griffin, Russell Henley, EVR, Ryan Palmer, Adam Svensson, Jason Day, Austin Smotherman, and Callum Tarren. If you want to combine that with your top birdies gained players, let's see. You have Lonto Griffin, second in opportunities, fourth in birdies. Svensson, seventh and sixth. Let's see. I'll give an honorable mention to Russell Henley here, second in opportunities, 17th in birdies. Bogeys, like I said, the numbers say, I think it's more birdies gained than bogeys avoided. If you want to look at birdies or better, because there are a few eagles here at TPC River Highlands, if you want to look at birdies or better, you've got Lonto Griffin, third, Adam Svensson, fifth, Henley, 15th, Spieth, 14th, okay, McNeely, 25th, okay, Joel Damon, 19th in opportunities, 13th in birdies or better, and 16th in birdies gained. Pretty decent combination there from Joel Damon. I just noticed Seamus Power, 22nd opportunities, first in birdies or better, first in birdies. He just doesn't get a lot of eagles. So Seamus Power is somebody also to take a look at for that tab. Let's go to proximity very quickly. And the reason why I don't think proximity, especially here, is going to be a big factor, we saw in the course breakdown that 150 to 175 was the most common approach shot here at TPC River Highlands. And I'll come back here. 150 to 175, most common. And especially compared to tour, the average tour event. Look here. Your top 11 of your top 12 players were negative from 150 to 175. I just don't see proximity being much of a factor here. I don't. We'll look at 2020. It's pretty much the same thing, really. I mean, you have a couple of players that were high, but look at the top 10. More than half of them were negative from that distance. Just don't see proximity being that big of a factor. And even total proximity, like Bryson. Good Lord, I don't think Bryson hit a green with this number in that statistic. Or if he was essentially on the fringe all weekend. My goodness. But he had any top 10s. So I just don't see proximity being much of a factor. So that's why I'm going to just skip it. Not even going to look at it. I'm not going to put any weight into it in my mixed condition model. For the same reason, par 3s are pretty mitigated here. It's surprising as a par 70, but it is. It is just, the par 3s are mitigated. Instead, it's the par 4s. So let's look at par 4 efficiency. And we saw that 400 to 450 was the be-all, end-all. 8 of the 12 par 4s here at TPC River Highlands fall into this range. And I mean, you can see here, all top 18 players last year were positive in terms of strokes gained par 4, 400 to 450. It is what the course is. And we also saw last night in the Excel portion that the 0 to 350 was very important. So I wanted to make sure I took a look at that. And indeed, the top 18 players, even though these say red, they're zeros. So even though they're minuscule in the red, I mean, you could argue that they're field average. So it looks like the top 18 players, guaranteed all of them were positive in 400, 450, and you could argue that they are field average or better in 0 to 350. Let's take a look at 2020. Par 4s, 400 to 450. Now, you do have a couple of more negatives, but you still only have 2 in the top 19, and you have 3 in the 0 to 350 in the top 19 in negative in terms of 0 to 350. But look at the overall top players in par 4s. You got to come down, tie for, so your top 36 players in 2020, top 36 players were positive in strokes gained par 4. That's pretty strong correlation. Hint, hint, wink, wink, all that good stuff. And then finally, 2019, par 4s, still more of the same in total. 400 to 450, we'll go to top 20. You do have a few more negative. You got 5 negative, but 3 of these are really darn close to field average. And then you do have 1 essentially field average in the 0 to 350 and a couple of pretty higher ones. So I'm still thinking it's 400 to 450. So let's go ahead and come over here. Let's scrutinize the par 4s, 400, 450. I'm going to take the short course filter off. Par 4s are par 4s, short course or not, 450 or 400 to 450, short course or not, doesn't really matter. So let me narrow this in. I'm going to come back to the start of this calendar year. So from the start of the calendar year, 1/1/22 forward, your top performers on par 4s in general: Rory, Scotty Scheffler, Justin Thomas, Xander, Jordan Spieth, Brian Harman, Sung Jae, Tony Finau, Keegan Bradley, Joaquin Niemann, and Jason Day. I skipped Will Zalatoris. He has withdrawn this week. Will Zalatoris is out. So there's your top performers on par 4s. And then we'll look at par 4s, 400 to 450. Those 10 are Scotty Scheffler, Joaquin Niemann, Justin Thomas, Lonto Griffin, Mito, Keegan Bradley, Jordan Spieth, Sung Jae, Luke List, Davis Riley, and Adam Long. First time we said Adam Long tonight. So of the players here that are top 10 in both, Scotty Scheffler, Joaquin Niemann it says 11th, but he's 10th since Will Zalatoris is withdrawn. So Scheffler, Niemann, JT, Keegan's top 10 in both, Spieth's top 10 in both, Sung Jae's top 10 in both. So interesting stuff there. We got about 10 minutes or so. That's going to do it for the Fantasy National portion. I will keep it up if people want to ask a quick question about a certain player or anything like that. But let's move to Microsoft Excel. And I did not do this last night. This will be a bit of a recap, and then I'll head over to the color-coded sheet. But this is the course data detail where I compare full field courses against each other. And even though this is a club down course, just to emphasize the fairways, off the tee is actually a quarter of a shot, or a little bit more than a quarter of a shot, more important than the average full field course. When I say full field course, places like the Charles Schwab, the Valero, I don't include things like the BMW 70 players. I don't include the Tournament of Champions 30 to 40 players. So when I say full field course, regular events on the PGA Tour where a full field is at least there. And we saw in the leaderboards, we saw graphically, yes, for the winners, strokes gained approach are important, but overall, it's just not really all that important here. It is a short game course. A quarter of a shot more important than putting. Almost a half a shot important on strokes gained around the green. Just speaking to the tee, sometimes a little bit of distance does matter. Very minimally, but it can. Which was surprising to me. It was. But the data shows, 1.62. It's minimal, but it is a little bit more important than the average full field course. Fairways, very, very important. Very, very important. Might just focus on fairways, seeing that good drives gained is exactly even with a full field course. Greens, somewhat important. But we're going to come over here. This is why I thought originally the bogeys were going to be more important. But we just went through the leaderboards. It really does look like it's birdies gained. So the data here, that I am uneasy about this showing to be more important. I still think it's birdies gained, which means I'm probably just going to go with opportunities on short courses in my final mixed condition model. We saw, at least graphically, par threes are just mitigated in importance. They just are. Maybe the 150 to 175, but there's only 2 holes on the course, on the scorecard of the course that measures to this length. I don't think we want to put a whole lot of emphasis into 2 holes. So, par threes are just not important here, or not as important here. Conversely, the par fives, you see more than a half a shot more important than the average full field course here at TPC River Highlands, and almost a half a shot more important from the 400 to 450. Now, surprisingly, this shows that it's 0.8 from these 2 holes. I went back and looked. The reason why this is so important is that not every course has 0 to 350 yard par fours. That's why this number it's actually getting skewed quite a bit. So that made me feel a lot better about seeing this number here. So I'll just show you really quickly. This is the raw stats. This is me going full math nerd on you. Sorry, but for example, the Arnold Palmer year over year, it's at Bay Hill, but they don't have 0 to 350. Puerto Rico doesn't have 0 to 350. Valspar, Corrales. That's why that number is so high, because there's less full field courses that have 0 to 350. So that makes me feel a lot better, because it's not going to be that important. It's not as important as what it's showing, but definitely the 400 to 450 is almost a half a shot. And then the par fives, again, it's kind of mitigated in importance. There's only 2 of them. The shorter one, because it's the eagle opportunity, shows that, or it seemingly is a little bit more important. It's still showing that it's just not all that very important. So maybe put 5% in par fives, but really, not all that much. And then finally, with proximity, we saw 150 to 175. Even though it's the most common approach shot distance, it's still not even as important as the full field average course. So I'm just not going to do anything with proximity. Just nothing. So there's a look at the Math Nerd formulas and comparisons of courses. But as promised, let's come into the strokes gained total broken out by their various statistics. So I'm going to go ahead and filter out all of the players who have only played it once. So events. So just as a reminder of what this is the same chart from Fantasy National. So the past 5 years, 2021, 2020, 19, 18, and 17. Of the past 5 years, these are the players, how many times they've played the event, their average finish, and how many times they missed the cut. So for example, Rory, 3 for 3, average finish of 13th. Patrick Cantlay, 4 for 4, average of a 14th. So on and so forth. And I do this to see where the high finishers, where exactly are those strokes gained going. So we see here Rory all in tee and approach. Like, he hasn't made putts here, even though putting is so important. Just interesting to see. Patrick Cantley has done everything well. Sam Burns, a little bit of everything. Let's see, Brian Harmon, who was the most strokes gained total player in the past 5 years here at TPC River Highlands. You see all of it in putting, a lot of it around the green. He does have a little bit of approach. Let's see, Kramer Hickok, all in off the tee and putting. Hank Lebiota, putting. Jason Day, very, very balanced. 4 for 5. Let's see, Mackenzie Hughes doing Mackenzie Hughes things. Short game prowess. But there is a little bit of a mix here between approach, putting around the green. So interesting to see. I thought there would be a whole lot more of putting and around the green, but some of these guys are hitting their irons around here. Let's take a look at some of the winners. Kevin Streelman in 2014. Yes, his statistics aren't factored in the year he won, but he still plays this course. He plays it well. His is all in approach and putting with a little bit of around the green. And he's still positive and off the tee. Let's see, other players who have won this event. Ches Reavie won it in 2019. His stats are in the factor here. All of his is in strokes gained approach. Interesting to see. Mark Leishman won in 2012. Approach and putting. Let's see. Other players who have won here. Harris English. Jordan Spieth won in 2017. Doing Jordan Spieth things. His irons are good around the green and putting. Let's see. Trying to gauge here. We saw Harris English. He's 2 for 4. There he is. Way down here. Harris English. All of his, so he had seemingly one very good putting week here at the Travelers. But he's also been pretty darn good around the green here. Let's see, 2020 was Dustin Johnson. He's not in the field. 2018 was Bubba. He's not in the field. Ken Duke in 2013, clearly not in the field. 14 Streelman. Russell Knox, 2016. He's the last one. Even though his win statistics aren't in here, where's Russell Knox? I think it's going to be easier just to filter for him. So Russell Knox. There. Okay, so he's been pretty mediocre. He's missed the cut twice in 5 tries in the past 5 years. Average finish of 73rd. Okay. He won it in 2016. Interesting. All right, so as we go across here, let's take a look at some of these winners or high performers and where they're performing well. You see distance kind of all over the place. Not mandatory, but it certainly doesn't hurt. I mean, Rory, clearly, Cantley, Brooks. Brendan Todd's never been on distance. Hickok's generally not known for distance. So, I mean, guys are just kind of playing their style of game. Putnam's never been known for distance. Fairways, surprisingly, fairways just isn't the be-all, end-all. I would have thought this would have been heavy green from all the high finishers here. Brendan Todd is a fairway finder. Kramer Hickok's generally a fairway finder. But it doesn't look like a whole lot here. Streelman, former champion, finding fairways. Doc Redman finding fairways. Brendan Steele's played this event very well, finding fairways. Good drives, greens. Be interested to hear your all's take in the comments or in chat. What you think about this tab, distance fairways, good drives and whatnot. Let's look at birdies and bogeys. And again, looks like there's a higher propensity of green in the birdies gained as opposed to the bogeys avoided. So that's 2 of the 3 things essentially, leaderboards and this strokes gained total broken out. That's showing birdies gained more important than bogeys. Not to say that they're, bogeys aren't important at all, but looks like there's a lean of birdies gained. Par 3s, doesn't look like there's a whole ton here. Little bit of success here, but like the highest number I see off bat is 2.4, and then if we come over here to the par 4s, you see a 6.3, 5.8. And remember, this isn't a top. This is average. So, Kramer Hickok's averaged gaining 6.3 strokes gained on par fours. Rory, 5.3. Brendan Todd, 5.8. And surprisingly, look at that. The 0 to 350 has the higher propensity of green. So maybe guys are just taking advantage of that short par four, the drivable par four, and eagling it. Interesting. Very interesting. Let's go ahead and sort a couple of these stats very, very quickly because we're running over a bit on time. I knew we would because I wanted to essentially make up for last night's debacle of a show. So let's see. We'll sort first. Let's sort on putting. We've seen how important strokes gained putting is here at TBC River Highlands. Let's sort on putting. So your top putters here, historically, Tommy Fleetwood. It's only one time, so I wouldn't put a whole lot into it. Bryce Garnett. He's only made the cut once, but he's putt well here. Michael Gligic. Brian Harmon. There you go. Top strokes gained total player in the past 5 years here at TBC River Highlands. Very high in putting. There's Kramer Hickok. Maverick McNeely only played it once. Harris English, a former champion. Mackenzie Hughes. Kevin Streelman, a former champion. There's Denny McCarthy. Charlie Hoffman. Sung Jae. David Lipsky. Very interesting. He played terrible the one time he played it, but he putt well. Okay. Let's take a look at we did enough around the green. Let's take a look at birdies and bogeys, specifically birdies. Birdies gained. And I'll scroll over for you all. Birdies gained. You got Brooks, Patrick Cantley, Aaron Wise, Stuart Sink. First time I think we've said him. P's local boy, Nick Hardy, along with 15 others apparently, but Nick Hardy. Andrew Putnam, Brian Harmon, Jason Day. There's Jordan Spieth, winner in 2016. Reevey in 2019. Rory, Xander, Sam Burns, Kramer Hickok. Interesting. Kevin Streelman, winner in 14. A couple others here. Let's take a look at par fours and par fours 400 450. Let's just go ahead and do 400 to 450, and then we can adjust off of that. So top 400 to 450, again, Tommy, one time. There's Kramer Hickok, there's Aaron Wise, Kisner. Seems like a good Kevin Kisner course. Short, precision, putting. Seems like a good Kevin Kisner course. Brendan Todd, Stuart Seat, Xander, Russell Henley. He popped on a few of the filters in Fantasy National. Brian Harmon again, Jason Day, Tyler Duncan. First time I think we've said him. He's 4 for 4 with an average of a 41st place finish here at the Travelers in the past 5 years. Very interesting. Charlie Hoffman's played it well. Varner's played it fairly well. So there we go. There's a look at some of the players and their strokes gained total broken out in the various statistics. I'll bring it back to the average finish for you all and then scroll all the way over. But I think that's going to do it for the data dive tonight. Hopefully the recap of the initial research, while rushed, made up for last evening's pretty shoddy show, if I'm being honest with myself. Like I said, I had a baseball game that I normally don't play on Sundays, but if I didn't show up, our team would have forfeited. So playing the game and then trying to scarf dinner down real quick, I was just fairly unprepared. So I apologize for that, but hopefully made up for tonight. A lot of good data that I saw during the show. I'm curious to hear your all's takes. So put it in the comments. What do you think that I'm missing? Is this going to be more of a strokes gained approach? Do you think it's more of a ball striking course than I'm giving it credit for? Do you think the greens are bent as opposed to POA? I'm going by POA just because it was played last year, classified by Fantasy National as POA, and POA is listed on the GCSAA tournament fact sheet. But I'd be curious to hear your take. Do you think it's bent? Do you think it's more birdies gained or bogeys avoided? Do you think the par 3s are more important? Par 5s are more important than I think they are? Be curious to hear all of that. So, guys, thanks for tuning in, watching, and listening. P and Josh and Awaken jumping in chat. I always appreciate the interaction, the questions, the ideas bouncing back and forth. So for all of the wagers that you have made so far this week at the Travelers, for any of the wagers you're thinking about making this week at the Travelers, and until I see you Wednesday night for the DFS Tactics show, may all your bets be profitable.